into the college basketball power hour. You might be asking yourself, it's up early this week? That's because it's Selection Sunday. It's one of the best days of the year. You have some teams whose hopes and dreams are accomplished. If you're North Carolina, you got in and nobody understood why. If you're West Virginia, you're upset and your hopes and your dreams are crushed. And all of us are left wondering, where is Fairleigh Dickinson? It's the same question I ask myself every single year on Selection Sunday. However, we never learn. Welcome into the podcast. I'm Caroline Fenton, joined in person at the Yahoo Sports Los Angeles studios. Ice Young, Jason Fitz. Guys, it's so good to see your smiling faces in real life, in person. You exist outside of the confines of my computer.
You're real.
You're real.
Like I
know how tall you are now.
Did you think I was tall? Did I
You
give a
are
tall presence?
You are tall.
Let the record show. I'm tall.
Wait. For point of reference here, Caroline, if you had to make a guess, how tall are you?
Am I?
Yeah.
I plead the fifth.
Okay. So I'm just saying the tall
Everyone's
is relative.
tall to me.
I'm just saying that was my point.
Literally,
that was all I was saying.
I look up to literally
Also,
everyone.
I mean, also, by the way, Fairleigh Dickinson, every year I think the same thing. Sounds like a prep school kid that everybody wanted to beat up. Like, there's no way that Fairleigh Dickinson is not named after some kid that just obnoxious, goes to a fancy school, speaks with a weird accent for no reason, has never been to a foreign country, but still doesn't just speak like everyone else in his class. That is 100%
like
who that
Stetson
is.
Bennett went to Fairleigh Dickinson prep.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I always think it sounds like a consulting firm.
Oh,
Like who
I'd hire him.
who advised you on this project? It was Fairleigh Dickinson. I was like, oh, okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Mid-major or consulting firm.
That's a game for next week's pod.
New game. That's a new game that we're going to go through. But let's get into it because we had surprises really on both sides of the bracket. Teams, like I just mentioned, North Carolina, how in the world did they get into the field? Seeding was kind of up in the air. Some things went chalk like we expected. Auburn on the men's side, #1 overall seed. I think we all kind of expected that. But what surprised us? I'll start with you, either on the men's side or the women's side. What stuck out to you as really the biggest shock of Selection Sunday?
Yeah, it is for sure the Tar Heels getting in. Like, I'm not wearing blue for them. It is for sure UNC getting in. 1-12 in quad 1 games. 1-12. How do you get into the tournament being 1-12? There are several other teams who had more quad 1 wins, who did better in their regular season, who challenged themselves in the non-con. You had 13 opportunities to beat quad 1 teams, and you did it once. And yet you make the tournament. I'm sorry, but there's got to be some type of bias there because I don't understand it.
I'm angry. I'm sorry. I'm hopping on top of you because I'm angry about this. And I'm angry about this because of everybody else that's impacted. Like the secondary effect of this is not just, I heard Jay Billis say we worry too much about who the 30 or 35th best team in the country is. No, I'm worried about every kid that busted their ass all year to try and have their moment of greatness to play in the NCAA. Like, it is such a gift to get into the tourney and a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We need to stop worrying about our brackets in this conversation and start worrying about the actual human beings that are impacted by it. And I think it's absolutely cowardly of the committee to put up somebody that, because one of the committee chairs is the AD of North Carolina. He should not have even been able to speak on this. Like, let me talk to the rest of the committee. Tell me exactly how that vote went down. Be transparent. If you want to eliminate yelling, arguing, conspiracy theories, the way you eliminate that is with a level of transparency that cannot be doubted. They haven't given us that. And instead, they just rammed the brand of North Carolina down our throats for the NCAA tournament. And I just don't think this team is deserving.
Yeah, especially when you look at the first 4 teams that were out. Indiana, Ohio State, Boise State, all teams that I have watched this season, have watched closely. Any one of them could have gotten the nod over UNC, and I would say, yeah, that's a tournament team. That's a team that could win a game in the tournament. UNC, I just don't see it. And they would have to shock the world, to me, to win the first game in the tournament.
We couldn't even beat Duke without 2/5 of Duke.
Two
Two
major players out,
Like-
and still couldn't beat them. But we give them... I don't know.
And West Virginia was another one that I felt like if you just look at the resume, take the teams away from it, just look at the wins and the losses, West Virginia was 6-10 in quad 1 games. I mean, not a great record. You had 5 more than North Carolina. Now, granted, West Virginia had more quad 2 losses, but West Virginia did not have a single loss in quad 3. North Carolina did. And I'm sorry, if you have a quad 3 loss like that, you do not get the opportunity to compete for a national championship. And Fitz, when we were watching the selection show, you brought up a very good point that Texas being in, the selection shows were saying, and we were saying, okay, that's Texas's SEC benefit of the doubt, that they're playing in the deepest, most competitive conference that we have ever seen in men's college basketball. Texas gets the BOD, the benefit of the doubt there. So why does North Carolina get that same draw in a much less competitive and much more shallow ACC? That doesn't make sense. The inconsistencies from the committee are frustrating.
If you're going to give benefit of the doubt to conferences for their greatness when you have this conversation, then that was the reason you put Indiana in.
Right.
Because, again, the Big Ten had 8 schools in. Like, we're talking about this as like this is an SEC tournament, NCAA tournament. The Big Ten still put in 8, and I think they're going to have an opportunity with some of those 8 to go on a real run. So Indiana being part of that, man, they deserve that extra. Like, if you're going to say, man, the Big Ten was so good that they put 8 in, then you got to put Indiana over North Carolina in that situation. And the Texas precedent was we're willing to accept quad 1 losses if it includes quad 1 wins. That's what you're saying with Texas. Indiana has more quad 1 wins. Like that was a simple, there's not a consistent logic in this, and that drives me crazy.
The only thing that UNC had going for them was that they won 8 out of the last 10 games.
Yeah.
That's the only stat that I saw that made me say, okay. But no, I just think the committee got it wrong. And I'm going to say that. I just don't think they deserve to be there. Now, again, they're going to have to make me eat my words and win a game in the first round, but I don't think so. Can I tell you something else that surprised me on the women's side? Notre Dame, a 3 seed? I almost threw my laptop, y'all. Notre Dame, a 3 seed. We're talking about a team that was undefeated in ACC conference play, which is one of the best conferences in the country on the women's side. Undefeated, and then they lost 3 out of their last 5 games, all to ranked opponents. Let's not get crazy. NC State, Florida State, all to ranked opponents, and they get a 3 seed. NC State slid and got a 2 seed. Now, NC State's a great example of a team that played themselves into a top 2 seed. Like, fantastic way to finish the season. But for Notre Dame, and what they were able to do last year, with Hannah Hidalgo just being a freshman, without Olivia Miles on the floor, now you have both of them on the floor with the rest of this team. I think it's a bit disrespectful that Notre Dame is a 3 seed.
A bit disrespectful. I think it is it's an abomination that Notre Dame fell to a 3 seed, especially considering who got the 2 seed. And look, I don't want any TCU fans coming for me telling me that I hate TCU. I don't hate your team. I pinky promise you. And I know that we're talking about a Notre Dame team that did not win their conference tournament and a TCU team that did win their conference tournament. But look at the season and the resume as a whole. Notre Dame's resume is better than TCU's. Notre Dame's strength of schedule is better than TCU. So if it was, hey, Notre Dame's a 3 in a region where UConn is a 2, okay, I still don't like it, but I can understand it a little bit more. But TCU getting the 2, Notre Dame getting the 3 doesn't make any sense to me. But if I'm Texas, I'm looking at my region and I'm like, the 3 in my region is Notre Dame?
Sure.
Really?
I mean,
and these 2 teams played earlier in the season. Notre Dame beat Texas by 10. Notre Dame has also beat USC, guys, this season. Like, I'm just not understanding what more they needed to do, Fitz.
21 days ago, they were the number 1 team in the country. If you're telling me that you, like, this is the way I couch that. What do you mean? Like, so if I'm sitting in the committee right now and they're telling me you're a 3 seed, then I would challenge the committee. Do you realize what you are saying here is that this has been an epic disaster and a fail of the completion of this season? You don't go from being number 1 in 21 days to being a 3 seed without the bottom falling off, especially when there aren't injuries involved. You're talking about, basically, you're saying that the most disastrous thing we've seen in recent women's college basketball memory is the end of the Notre Dame season. It wasn't what we wanted it to be for anybody that was watching it, but it wasn't that. Like, I just think this is such a mass overreaction set by the standard that we thought 21 days ago. Everybody was like, man, this Notre Dame team looks so good. And we fell in love with that. You cannot judge them by who you thought they were 21 days ago. You have to judge them by who they are today. And I don't think they're doing that when you look at the way they seeded this out.
They have lost 3 of their last 5, to be fair. And we just talked about how North Carolina on the men's side got that benefit of the doubt because they've won 8 of their last 10. We're all human. You know, the NCAA selection committee committee is made up of humans. They're also a community. That sounds cute. Precious. They're humans. They have human bias. We all have human bias. We look at what happened the last 2 weeks and we put more weight into that than what's happened in the last 2 months. But if you look at who Notre Dame lost to, Duke, the eventual ACC champion who's a 2 seed. They lost to NC State, another 2 seed. They lost to Florida State, a top 25 team in the country. So I just felt like maybe the committee was picking those losses apart with a fine-tooth comb a little bit more than they were picking apart others. But I'll throw another.
To compare, we saw Auburn men lose 3 out of their last 4 regular season games and still keep the overall number 1 seed.
They lost their last 2 and then won 1 game in the SEC tournament and lost
again. Yeah.
This is a maddening inconsistency between two committees, too, that I think we saw. Like, look, the women's committee was obviously valuing conference championship week. The men's committee didn't give a damn about it. Like, you can't tell me that Auburn loses and Florida goes on that run and Florida wins the SEC against those teams, and Florida is still the 4th of the number 1 seeds. That's basically telling me that when we started conference week, championship week, everybody in the committee shut their laptops and said, we'll see you on the weekend. We don't really care what happens this weekend, which, by the way, I think is the next time we go to a coach that says, hey, conference championship week doesn't matter and fans freak out, use this as the example. Like, if I'm a coach of a high-profile team that knows I've got a shot at like, if I'm Auburn's coach next year and I'm sitting here as number 1, I sit my whole team for the conference tournament week. I don't care about that.
Right.
I care about winning the NCAA tournament because the committee just told me it doesn't matter.
Well, Michigan being a 5 seed, I think, is the perfect example of that.
Perfect.
Michigan men just won the Big Ten championship and they're a 5. And Wisconsin is a 3. That does not make sense to me, but I think that is the lesson here, that conference championship weeks, conference tournament weeks, they might mean more for the teams on the bubble than it means for teams that are seated between 1 and, let's say, 5. I do think, though, that, let's say, if Tennessee won the SEC tournament, Tennessee would have been that last 1 seed. And Florida probably would have been 5th overall, that first 2 seed. But we're talking about the difference between 4th overall and 5th overall.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a big difference between 4th and 5th overall.
I have a hard time
still.
erasing out of my mind the fact that Florida didn't just beat Tennessee. They handled Tennessee.
Yeah.
Florida didn't just beat Alabama. They beat the snot out of them. So now you're telling me, and let's look at this, like Alabama's a 2 seed, right? And I know injury was part of that. Tennessee's a 2 seed. So you're telling me that Florida just beat 2 of your 2 seeds by double digits in games they made look easy? And they're not better at this point than Auburn, who's lost 3 or 4, and Duke, who's without their superstar player? Like,
and barely eked by North Carolina in the ACC tournament.
What are we doing? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Someone gave me a hot take saying that we would be talking more about Florida if they had a premier coach that was older. That's a Billy Donovan, a Tom Izzo, et cetera, et cetera. But because they have a younger coach in Todd Golden, who hasn't necessarily proved himself yet, we're not all our eggs in a basket on Florida. But if you're looking at them from a basketball standpoint and what they've done and them being 30-4 this season, Florida probably should have been the number 1 overall seed.
And this is, again, why, look, as a guy that talks about the game that didn't play the game, I'm the first to loudly say there have to be more voices in these committee rooms from players. There have to be more voices in these committee rooms from people that have no bias, that have no, like the one thing they kept talking about even during the selection show is, well, certain people have to recuse themselves from the room. Same thing happens in college football. So if you're affiliated with North Carolina and it's the North Carolina conversation, it's not just that you don't vote, you have to leave the room entirely. Well, that means sometimes when you get into these big decisions, there's only 3 or 4 people voting on it. And it's like, that's stupid. There has to be a better way for college sports to get. I love committees. I think committees are important. I just think we need to look at who's on these committees.
Committees?
I do.
Literally, no one loves.
I love committees. I love.
And in sports, in life, have you ever been on a committee that you're like, whoa, I love being on this committee?
Yes.
The prom committee.
I'm all in on committees. Like, look, I think part of the joy is like some people hate. This was the example I always use. If we were sitting down and saying like, what's the best pizza, and you ask 13 people to decide on the best pizza, like there would be a knockdown, drag out argument. I want in on this.
I'll join that.
I want in. Like, I love to just stir it. Just love to just stir things up a little bit. Like
so
that's
you
what
would say deep dish.
No, deep dish is trash.
Okay.
New York pizza. New York pizza. But
Connecticut pizza.
I'm not
Come
going
on, Fitz. You got to ride or die for the home state.
Connecticut pizza? Is that even a thing?
Yeah, no. Okay, so let me tell you.
It's the best pizza in the world.
When I moved to Connecticut.
In the world.
STG.
No,
ST freaking G ice. It's the best pizza I have ever had
you
in my life.
co-signing this?
Shut the gates.
Swear to God.
swear to
Okay,
God.
I don't know. I'm just making a acronym. Yeah, no.
Old man in the room.
No, again, I don't have any gray hair. Look, I got like one that keeps popping up. Anyway,
Pluck it out.
yeah, there we go. No, when I moved to Connecticut, I was like, "What's good here?" And everybody said pizza and wings, and I was like, "Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard."
Right.
Yeah, pizza
and then I
and
had
so
the pizza and
American.
wings, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Is
like,
it?
yeah, it really is. Like, it is.
Okay.
Connecticut, New York style pizza is done better in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah,
The one time I stopped to visit you.
yeah, come on,
get Connecticut
come on to
pizza.
camp, and like, come on over to ESPN area, and like, I'll take you around to all the good.
Sally's, Pepe's.
Yeah, and then there's a wings place in Connecticut that Food TV has named America's best wings like 6 times. Like, it's J Tim's. Shout out to J Tim's.
Shout out to
I'm
J.
shocked.
James.
I'm as shocked as UNC getting into the tournament right now.
well.
Like Connecticut pizza
And
is
that's
like the
shocking.
thing. Yeah, I'm
Connecticut
shocked.
pizza
That's
deserves it.
shocking.
North Carolina should be eating the pizza with us, watching the games. Love a committee.
No, literally no one has ever loved a committee every day in their lives. But I digress. But I will say, if we are going to have a more fair process, and look, there's always going to be someone who feels like they get the short end of the stick in any sort of committee selection process, football, basketball, men's, women's, whatever it might be. We cannot have active athletic directors sitting on these selection committees. Whether they leave the room or not, there is always going to be some sort of bias that seeps through. There's always going to leave room for, okay, well, what kind of conversations were happening before said athletic director left the room? It feels so wrong and so backwards and so twisted that we have people with active rooting interests making decisions like this.
Perception is reality is a phrase we've all heard.
Yeah.
But I go back a long time ago, and because again I'm old. There's this old country singer named Kenny Rogers. Right, I'm giving you like the old. But I was touring, and Kenny sat down one day and he was talking about life. And Kenny was like, "You have to understand that perception is reality because you helped make that reality, and it's the reality you live in. And when you add that little element to it." I think what the committee, like what the NCAA forgets sometimes is that given the fact that we live in a conspiracy theorist society, if you leave that door open, then people will assume. And nobody assumes the best. We don't live in that world anymore. So just having an athletic director sitting on the committee allows people to imagine this. The NCAA has created that perception, and that is now their reality. And the only way they can change that is to break those ties with anyone currently affiliated. And then, in my personal opinion, I don't think you can put 2 people up. I think the entire committee should sit on a stage with microphones in front of every one of them. Their vote should be put behind them, and they should have to answer for every single decision that they made. And I've said, like, I have a Bolitnikoff Award in college football vote. I have a Grammy vote, and I will stand by any of the decisions. Yeah, I know, it's a humble brag.
Yeah.
I will stand by
Okay.
any of the decisions I've made, and if you ask a question about why I voted for it, I better be able to answer, or I don't deserve my vote. That's all I'm asking of the committees in college sports.
It's okay to open it up to the court of public opinion. I'll add in another kind of shocking thing from today. South Carolina, not the #1 overall seed on the women's side. Shocked to me. But with that being said, if we look at paths, and look, Dawn Steely was up on ESPN in the selection show, and she was very clearly and obviously not happy about how the selection committee viewed South Carolina's resume and the way that they're playing right now compared to the rest of the field. South Carolina still is a 1 seed. South Carolina got the second 1 seed. That might actually work in South Carolina's favor. Because if we look at paths, Ice,
Yeah.
I think South Carolina very well could have the most favorable of all of the 1 seeds in the women's bracket.
Yeah, I totally agree. On South Carolina's side, their 2 seed is Duke. Their 3 seed is UNC. 2 teams that I think they can beat. The game, if Duke advances that far, because I think that's an if. They're a team that plays tremendous defense, but sometimes they struggle to score. If they run up against the wrong team that doesn't struggle to score.
Like a Vanderbilt, who they
Yeah.
very well could face in
And
a
a
round of
Michaela
32,
Blakes who
can
could
put
drop
up
50
plus.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. A player to watch in this tournament for sure is Michaela Blakes for Vanderbilt. A lethal scorer, a freshman that you just have not seen her type of game this season. She plays different than everybody else. But I think those 2 and 3 seeds, they can get by. UCLA, though, my goodness. I mean, you got the #1 overall seed, and I'm happy that you earned that. But the 2 seed in being NC State, a team that last year went to the Final Four, has 2 premier guards in Isaiah James, Sanaya Rivers. That is going to be a tough one to get by. And then the 3 seed is LSU, who played in their SEC tournament without Flau'jae Johnson. But she will be back for the tournament. Kim Mulkey, knows how to win this time of year. I don't care what you say about Kim Mulkey, bro. This time of year, she pulls out wins. I think UCLA has a tough stop. And you already know my little hot take, but I'm going to tell y'all.
Yeah.
In the second round, their 8-9 game is Richmond and Georgia Tech, right? Is that first round? I believe that Richmond will beat Georgia Tech. I've seen them play up close and personal. I think they got that. I think UCLA will have a tough time beating Richmond. I do. If there's a number 1 seed that I think is going to exit the earliest, I do believe it is UCLA.
So you think that UCLA gets bounced in the round of 32?
I think they could. If there was a number 1 seed that I would pick to leave the tournament early, I'm sorry, but it would be the Bruins.
Do they have the toughest sledding on their side of the bracket, or do you think that they'll just be the first one out?
I 100% think so. I think they have the toughest one. Yeah, I think whether they see an NC State or an LSU, the number 4 seed there is Baylor, which is a team that can mix it up defensively and make things tough on you. I'm not sure they have the scoring power to compete with UCLA, but I do think they're going to have a tough road to the number 1 seed. I absolutely think so.
I don't want to gloss quickly over the fact that Dawn Staley made it clear not only was she not happy, but she felt like they scheduled in a way that deserved the number 1 overall seed, and now they're going to look at their schedule moving forward. These are these sorts of conversations that we hear all the time on the men's side, that we hear all the time in college football. Yeah. I'm not going to schedule anybody if you're not going to reward me.
Right.
There are ramifications to South Carolina not getting that number 1 overall seed.
Yeah.
It also really, really just puts her on edge, right? And she said, we don't need another chip. I get all that. But guys, walking into practice this week, things are going to be a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just looking at, you want to look at the revenge angle for a team coming through this. If you're South Carolina, I'm looking squarely across the other side. I agree with you, UCLA could fall. We talked last week about UConn.
Yeah.
I like the way UConn's bracket breaks in front of them. I'm just looking at this saying Dawn wanting revenge for just a thorough ass whooping this year to UConn in a national championship game kind of feels like that's a collision course waiting to happen.
100%.
A pissed off Dawn Staley and a pissed off South Carolina team is terrifying.
That makes all the entertainment. That's what I need. That's what I need. Thank you, committee. For real, because I agree with you. I think she's about to come here and run through everybody and get a back-to-back championship. I even think how they pulled out the SEC tournament championship, against Texas. It's a tough team to play multiple times. I'm not sure why they didn't get rewarded. But you look at UCLA's schedule and their resume, they're 30-2. The 2 teams the 2 losses only come to 1 team, USC. Everybody else they've been able to beat. So I get it. I think for UCLA, they saved themselves and get number 1 overall seed because they won the Big Ten championship. If they had lost that, it would have been South Carolina's.
I do also, I think ESPN made a good point to give some credit to the show I was watching there earlier. I hate the fact that you got a bracket in Spokane and a bracket in Birmingham. They're going to finish, and then they got to hustle to Tampa. It is not equidistant to get from Tampa to Birmingham as it is from Tampa to Spokane.
Yes.
So that is such a difference. These are the little things that I think they've got to start thinking about when they map this women's tournament out. And to your point of UCLA, possibly going down in the second round, it's great for the game. I'm sorry, it is great. Having a 1 seed fall in the first or second round, that's. Of all the years we've talked about how there's more talent all over the sport this year, it's great for the game. Having that happen makes everybody's ears perk up and say, wait, what happened?
Those are the things that we talk about for years. We'll be talking about St. Peter's beating Kentucky for forever. Every single March Madness, we're going to refer back to those kinds of games. I also think another little tidbit on UCLA's side, I'm with you, Ice. I think that UCLA deserved the number 1 overall seed. I also think South Carolina deserved the number 1 overall seed. Only one gets it. But even if I think UCLA deserved the number 1 overall seed, I wouldn't be surprised if they're the first one to go down.
Yeah.
But what does work in their favor, they're in Spokane.
Yep.
2 seed in that region is NC State. That's a long trip. 3 seed is LSU. Baton Rouge to Spokane, that's a really long trip. 4 seed Baylor, that's a long trip to Spokane. That's not that long of a trip for UCLA. So at least one kind of little tidbit to look at there. But Fitz, I'll ask you, on the men's side, who got the worst draw?
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the bigger gauntlets I can remember seeing. And you can look at the way that this bracket pulls out for Florida. Again, this is what you get. Congratulations, you won the SEC tournament. I think you were deserving of the number 1 overall seed. And now instead, you're going to come out of this thing and you could, in the second round, have to take on the 2-time defending national champion Connecticut team that I don't think they're a shell of who they've been. But still, You're gonna have 24 hours. I keep going back to coaches that I trust. You got 24 hours to implement a game plan, advance scout, and figure out where you are. And I'm giving Hurley 24 hours to get ready. Man, you mentioned earlier, would Florida get more benefit of the doubt if they had a more seasoned coach? Well, this comes into that. And then, heck, if you win that, like you could be facing a team in Memphis that I think we're sleeping on right now that is really good. And if you get through Memphis, my God, at that point, your reward, what are you going to get, St. John's? Like every single layer of this for Florida just gets worse and worse. And it's like a really bad horror movie where every time you think Michael's dead, he pops back up and he's coming back at you. That's this bracket for Florida.
Even the 3 and 4 seeds, Texas Tech and Maryland.
Yeah. Oh, Maryland.
Teams, Maryland shooting the lights out right now. I mean, a tough team to beat. I will say, though, about this side of the bracket for Florida, and the best thing about Florida is that they've been battle tested. When you've been through the SEC, you know how to beat any type of team, game in and game out. You only got to win 6 games to win a national championship. And 6 to them could seem like a light number. So I feel like that they should be fine getting through this bracket. I also just want to say that you assume that UConn is going to win that 8-9 game.
No, I don't assume
Oklahoma.
that.
Oh, okay.
I don't assume
Because
anything.
I don't think so. I think Dan Hurley going home first round.
I struggle with UConn because I'm
Yeah, I
going
don't.
back and forth with, okay, well, this is not the UConn team that we've known the last 2 years, but also, it's still UConn.
Yeah.
So if I'm going back and forth in my mind with how scary UConn can really be in this tournament,
Yeah,
Fitz.
there's one of those like cheesy praise and worship mega church songs called Humble Thyself. I just keep thinking Humble Thyself with Hurley every time. Like a first round exit for UConn is just, God.
Show your rings now.
I'm just, yeah. Do you think he wants a little of that back? Like you just point at the rings to Creighton, like especially
No,
if
he doesn't
Creighton,
want any of that back.
he should.
Dan Hurley,
He
of course he
should.
doesn't want that back.
He should, you know. I'm just
not.
It's
Nope.
there's a fine line between swagger and just slap me arrogance, and Hurley has walked that all year. You can be that when you win 2 straight national championships, but the minute you lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament, man, there's going to be a lot of people in Connecticut that suddenly aren't offering to buy his wings for him. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you got to give me an update on how it's going. I want to know.
I mean, the basketball gods giveth, and the basketball gods will taketh away. They will humble you quickly. We've seen it with Cal year over year in the NCAA tournament. All right, we'll take a quick break here. We talked about the brackets. Let's pick the brackets, our official predictions coming up next. All right, our official men's tournament predictions. Now, full disclosure, we are taping this podcast on Selection Sunday, so nothing has happened. We haven't looked at any sort of analysis or breakdowns. This is purely our vibe index. Fitz, your tournament predictions, champion and dark horse.
Well, the champion's going to be Duke. I think Duke's going to win it all.
You say that very
I say that very confidently.
Oh, it's gonna be Duke,
I don't need a
obviously.
lot of analysis
in this
on this.
incredibly deep field. It's obviously going to be Duke, who played in the rinkiest, dinkiest little conference
Okay, 2
of
things
them
can be
all.
too. Your conference can be a big old bag of ass, and you can still be a really good basketball team. I don't know why I went with that.
I mean, you're
It's
not
adult
wrong,
analysis
though.
you only get here. No, I think at some point, like, we just got to trust our eyes, right? I'm going to trust that Cooper Flagg comes back and is healthy. And if Cooper Flagg comes back and is healthy, the ways he can beat you and what he can do for perimeter defense particularly is just going to make it so tough. So then you look at it and say, okay, if I trust coaches that I know have been there before, teams that don't turn the ball over a lot, and guard play. Those are like the 3 holy trinities for me of March Madness trust. So I like what Duke's going to be able to do in that. I think it's I like the 2 seeds. We did our live stream earlier. I think Michigan State has a real shot at the championship game. I think St. John's has a real shot at the championship game. I think Tennessee could advance. I think all of the 2 seeds can actually turn out to be really good. And I don't know that there's a Cinderella, like peel behind the curtain. Even our editors at Yahoo are like, pick a Cinderella. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't love any of these 11 seeds going all the way to the Elite 8. But I do think that the Big Ten overall has been so misseeded that I wouldn't be surprised to see a Maryland, a Wisconsin, a Michigan go further than we expect. Like, everyone's right. The SEC is great. I think what we've forgotten is the very top of the Big Ten is also great and also belongs in this conversation. So I think, while it's not a dark horse, I think any of the Big Ten teams could actually disrupt some brackets.
And Cinderellas are tough because that's what makes them a Cinderella.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know where they're going to come out of nowhere. You can't pick that team today on Sunday, March 16th and say, this is going to be the Cinderella. It's the shock and awe and surprise of it all. But Ice, I'll ask you, your champion and your dark horse.
Yeah, okay. On the men's side, I'm going Houston. I believe in the Cougars. I believe in their defense. I think that they have multiple pieces that will set them up for success. And I just think throughout the tournament, you need defense to travel. You might not make shots, but if you can defend and the other team doesn't score, then you give yourself a chance. So I like Houston. My dark horse, I'm really excited about this dark horse, y'all. It's VCU. It's VCU. You mentioned earlier, like the historic games that we always talk about in March. I couldn't go out without mentioning UMBC's upset over Virginia a couple years ago. Ryan Odom was the head coach for that. He's the head coach for VCU. They play a fantastic style of defense. They get steals. They're in passing lanes. They run it up. They have BYU in the first round. It's a 6-11 game. I have them favored in that, and I actually think that they could win the next game after that. I actually think VCU could get to a Sweet 16.
They'd be taking on Wisconsin in the next round. And Wisconsin, I just praised the Big Ten. But Wisconsin has had some moments where they just forget how to score.
Yeah.
So, like, I do think that'd be an interesting matchup.
To their credit, scoring is hard.
Yeah, well,
So,
that's fairly hard.
It's super easy to forget.
There's a whole group of people trying to prevent it from happening.
Right. Cut them some slack there. My pick today would be Florida. And I also thought that I was being like fun and different and like super quirky. Look at me, like picking this team that's the 4th 1 seed. But I was watching some of the selection shows. Just about every insider, analyst, and expert picked Florida to win the national championship. So it's not like I'm picking any sort of crazy off the wall kind of pick here. The reason why I feel so confident in Florida is they can beat you in so many different ways. They are so deep. They can score. They play good defense. They can rely on different guys to score. If it's not Walter Clayton, it's Alex Condon. And this team plays with such a chip on their shoulder. We were talking about this earlier, Ice. The mid-major mentality. Florida, obviously, not to a mid-major, the SEC tournament champions. But you look at their head coach, and Todd Golden, he came from San Francisco. You look at Walter Clayton, who came from Iona. You look at Will Reichard, he came from Belmont. You look at Elijah Martin, he came from FIU. You have, and I don't say this in a mean way or a derogatory way, it kind of feels like a little bit of an island of misfit toys that all came together at the perfect time, and they fit together so perfectly. They're deep. They're versatile. They've been through the gauntlet, which might work to their favor, might work against them. It's the rest versus rust kind of conversation. I love Florida, even though we just talked about how hard their schedule is and how hard their draw could potentially be on their side of the bracket. I like Florida. And I don't have a dark horse necessarily, but after I just said it's hard to pick Cinderellas, I do have a Cinderella.
Oh.
McNeese.
Ooh, I love it.
Be still my LSU Tiger heart. I adore Will Wade. I love Will Wade. You pick VCU, a former Will Wade stop. McNeese has won the most games this season than they have in their entire franchise history. McNeese has not lost a game since February 1st. And I know that they're not necessarily playing in the deepest conference in all of college basketball. I know that their strength of schedule isn't necessarily the highest up there, but McNeese scheduled Alabama earlier in the season. Like, McNeese's non-conference schedule has at least put them through a little bit of a gauntlet, has kind of shown them the things that they need to work on, the things that they need to learn from throughout the regular season. So I like McNeese mostly because I love Will Wade. Will Wade is going to get that team so motivated and fired up. He's also another one that knows how to win this time of year.
Coaching is half the battle.
It is.
Half the battle.
It's a tough matchup against Clemson, but if they get through Clemson, they get the winner of Purdue and High Point. Like, that's a winnable game for them.
I think so.
Then they would run into Houston, and that's where every
Hey, you won too. Good job.
You won too.
Good job.
And I think a Cinderella can be different things. That if McNeese wins a couple of games in the tournament, they don't have to win the national championship. If they can win a couple of games, make some noise, have a huge upset, I consider that a Cinderella. But let's hop over to the women's side as well. South Carolina? Am I alone in that? Is it South Carolina?
No, it's UConn. UConn's going to win the national championship.
Okay.
I've got
Look at you being a homer.
I've got a whole. No, I'm not a UConn fan. I'm a UNLV fan, by the way. Robbed that they were left out of the women's tournament. But
and that's your UNLV bite.
There you go. No, here's the thing. Like, I like the way the bracket breaks out for UConn, and if the bracket breaks the way that it looks like it can, they would take on USC and make sure that's clarity here. That's Southern California USC. And that's a winnable game for them. And then they get UCLA, very tough matchup, obviously. I think that'd be the toughest for them. They've already shown that they can absolutely wipe the floor with South Carolina. We've seen that. And I'm buying in on this whole like Disney movie ending to this for Paige. I think, if this is the moment, like this is her last chance to be appreciated before she goes to the W, where she's going to have a great career. I kind of love the focused version of Paige that I think we're going to get through this course of this. Plus, Sarah Strong, by the way, playing incredibly well right now. In fact, I was asking one of our coworkers earlier, if UConn wins the championship, who's more likely to be the most outstanding player? Is it going to be Paige or Sarah? Because I think either one of them could make that argument. Or it could be Ozzy. It could be Azzy. It could be any of the three.
Azzy some love.
But Sarah was my secondary pick. But a true freshman through the course of the tournament.
Yeah.
I don't love.
Yeah.
So I'm saying Paige Becker's redemption, UConn wins the championship.
I think if AZ Fudd averages double figures, you could be right. I don't think UConn will get there with just Paige and just Sarah. But if they have a three-headed monster and AZ is dropping 15-plus points and shooting the way she can as one of the best shooters in the country, I absolutely believe that UConn and Gino have a chance. Absolutely believe.
We're making so much chaos. Something just fell in the studio.
I'm just going to act like it's not a ghost back
No,
there.
like something just fell over in the studio. It's like, oh my God, this UConn time. I mean, there we go. It's like,
Not the Huskies. Could never be the Huskies. I'll ask you. I know I said South Carolina. I feel confident in South Carolina. Why do you feel confident in South Carolina?
Okay. So one, it's in Dawn Staley we trust, right?
Always.
Like she's won 9 out of the last 11 SEC championships. She's won 2 national titles in the past 3 years. Here's what I'm going to say about this Dawn Staley team that I don't trust right now. Normally when she wins championships, she has a premier big. She's had Camila Cardoso. She's had Aaliyah Boston. Before that, it was Asia Wilson. This team does not have a premier big. They have 10, maybe 11 very good deep players. Any of those 10 or 11 could start on any other team in the country, but normally that's how they win. So I'm curious to see if they can pull out games not having her consistent formula. But I'm going to switch my pick. I am. I'm going to go with it. I have been a Notre Dame stan all season.
Let's go.
I have loved the combination of Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo. I think that Niele Ivey is tired of getting to the Sweet 16. She's done it 3 years in a row, and I think she's tired of getting there. I believe that if Notre Dame can take care of the basketball and score, there won't be a team in the country that can stop them from scoring.
I'm shocked.
Because
like earlier you were like, am I about to take Notre Dame? And I thought you meant to the Final Four. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, tough path. They haven't played well, but yeah, the Final Four. I like that.
As a 3 seed. But I love their path because on their side, you got to get through Texas. They can beat them.
Yeah.
The 2 seed, TCU. I'm not even believing TCU is a 2 seed. I just think they ran through the Big 12, so they happen to get that seeding. I honestly believe that Notre Dame has the best path to get to the Final Four. I'm telling you, because Texas can't score 90 points. And if Notre Dame just makes it a scoring game, if they just go and say, we're going to play in transition, we're going to knock down threes, we're going to get high percentage looks, Texas can't score with Notre Dame. It'd have to be a low-scoring game.
South Carolina has shown the formula to shutting down Madison Booker. Now, it's easier said than done. It's one thing to see it on tape. It's another thing to execute it. But we've at least seen it done before. Madison Booker can go in some scoring droughts.
Yeah, but also that's what happens when you're in conference. You know, you watch so much film, you kind of pick them apart so you understand how to stop them.
You believe Notre Dame can beat Dawn Staley then in the Final Four? Like, it's easy for me to say Connecticut can do it because I can always rely on, a few weeks ago.
I do not, I don't know if South Carolina can defend.
She's dancing.
I'm serious. Listen. I do not know if South Carolina can defend Notre Dame when they're playing their best basketball. That's my take.
But can they play their best basketball consistently throughout the entirety of the tournament? Because that's what they're going to have to do to beat South Carolina.
with you. And they have been inconsistent to finish the regular season. I know. It's a crazy pick. Maybe it's not that crazy. They were the number 1 seed like 3 weeks ago. But I just believe with their guard play, you're not going to find a better duo if Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles are playing the way they're supposed to be playing. And that's on both sides of the basketball. I talk about Notre Dame scoring because that's what I love. But make no mistake about it. They lock up. They play fantastic defense, especially in the post as well. I think they could be a 3 seed that wins the national championship.
I think your point, too, is an important one. That I mean, they were the number 1 team 21 days ago. They were the number 1 team 21 days ago because of the way they looked for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So how do we balance 6 weeks of, oh, my God, versus 21 days of, wait a minute, you know, like, so the question is, are we seeing the real version of Notre Dame now, or are we seeing the real version of Notre Dame then? And I don't know, but I do believe in wake-up calls. And even, losing the number 1 ranking, that hurts. But being a 3 seed today, like every single woman in that program is looking in the mirror right now saying, no, this isn't the way it was supposed to go. So like if this can't wake you up, nothing can. And frankly, they've got a coach that knows. You're walking me into this. We're walking me.
Hey,
I don't hate it.
Listen,
in the slightest.
Let me also just say that in all of Notre Dame's Final Fours and championships, the common denominator has been Niele Ivey. She has either been a coach on the staff or she has been on the court playing and won those. I think I just have trust in her and the guard play, but I also just think that 3 seed is just they're going to be on a revenge tour.
Yeah.
And I don't think Texas can stop them.
That's a reason why I'm a little bit concerned about Auburn. Now, you just said you cannot let what has happened the last week, 2 weeks, whatever it might be, erase what they've done the entire season when talking about Notre Dame. I think we can apply that to Auburn on the men's side as well. That Auburn has lost, 3 of their last 4 games to finish out the regular season. Lost to Texas A&M, lost to Alabama, beat Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, and then lost to Tennessee in the SEC tournament. They didn't have that wake-up call. Yeah. They are still the number 1 overall seed. Now call it Auburn maybe unintentionally kicking their feet up a little bit because everything they wanted to achieve in the regular season had already been achieved. Maybe they I don't want to say kick their feet up a little bit, but they can look at the SEC tournament and say, well, maybe getting to the finals, the best thing that could have happened to us because we get one more day of rest after our gauntlet of an SEC schedule. But I think it's fair to be just a little bit concerned about Auburn and how they're going into the postseason.
No team has ever lost 3 of their last 4 regular season games and won a national championship on the men's side. I did the men's side.
There it
I didn't
is.
look
Say
at
it
the
again.
women's side.
Say it again
There
for the
it
world
is.
to hear.
No team has ever lost 3 out of their last 4 regular season games and won a national championship. I just don't think Auburn will pull it around. And I actually think, call me crazy, we've got them figured out. I think in those losses that they had, there were some consistencies. And I think teams across the country with their scouts will have them figured out. I wouldn't be worried about Auburn if I was everybody else.
My hot take, if you're going to say UCLA is out in the round of 32,
Yeah.
I think that Auburn loses to Louisville in the round of 32.
Ooh,
I picked Auburn to be my first 1 seed out today.
It's their first 1 seed
We've
out.
been calling the ACC so trash, but we got Louisville beating Auburn.
Louisville beating Auburn.
Wait, are you that sure Louisville takes down Creighton?
We shall see. We shall see, because some of those 8-9 matchups are a little bit iffy.
Yeah.
I think every 9 beats every 8. I'm taking every 9 this year in the men's side. Every 9 over every 8.
Auburn, the number 1 overall seed in the country, and if Louisville gets past Creighton in the first round, you're telling me Auburn has to play Louisville in Lexington?
Oh, God.
Who let that happen?
Good call.
Yeah, that is
Good
such
call.
a home court
What
advantage.
is up with the number 1 overall seeds not having favorable
They get the worst
bracket
draws.
size? Yeah, I don't
UCLA
understand.
and Auburn, both on the men's and women's side, respectively, they get the worst draws. And I'm picking UCLA to be the first 1 seed out on the women's side.
Yep.
I'm picking Auburn to be the first 1 seed out on the men's side. I don't know what that is, that the number 1 overall seeds, we're all picking to be the first ones out, but I mean, the draw is huge. The path is huge here, and they are not favorable for either of these teams. All right, we'll wrap up our final thoughts on the brackets on Selection Sunday, our final predictions coming up next. All right, let's wrap it up with just some storylines that we like. We'll just throw everything out on the table. First and foremost for me, we could have the potential for a USC-UCLA rematch for the 4th time this year if all goes chalk on that side of the bracket. And we could also have a Texas-South Carolina rematch also for the 4th time if all goes chalk on that side of the bracket. And they were discussing this on the selection shows. We were discussing it in the green room as we were all just watching all of the selection show unfold. Is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? And frankly, sometimes I don't need to see rematches. Sometimes I don't want to see the same teams play over and over. But if we get USC and UCLA and Texas and South Carolina, that's fine. That's cinema. I'm fine with that. I am totally okay if we get those matchups for the 4th time. Now, of course, a lot has to go right for those teams, for all of that to kind of go chalk. If we get to see USC and UConn again, another rematch in the Elite 8, I'm cool with that, because these teams are the best teams in the country, and we can't get enough of really quality basketball and really good matchups. So just looking at how the bracket could shake out, that's a storyline that I'm looking at.
I think, guys, we have to remember what your biggest moments as a sport are always for. So no matter what sport we're talking about, your biggest moments are your moments to bring fans in. Mm-hmm. So while there are plenty of women's college basketball fans who will say, I've seen this 2-3 times. All right. For so many people that weren't watching those regular season games, that don't watch those regular season games, what you want, in my opinion, out of your tournament is you want the biggest opportunity to grow your sport, right? So above and beyond everything else, if I get the fourth matchup between two landmark teams that also happen to be massive brands in all of sports that, also happen to have some of the best players in women's college basketball, and have some of the biggest coaches that are some of the biggest personalities, like all of these are what's like, you're basically putting all of your billboards out and saying, this is the reason that you should watch this sport all the time. That's how you grow. So I think anytime fans complain, no matter what the sport is, about getting a rematch in the playoffs or a rematch in the tournament, it's short-sighted because the playoffs and the tournaments aren't just for the diehards. It's for everybody else that this is the only time they've watched. And there are going to be millions of people flocking to the women's Final Four. I don't care what they get as long as they get the best version of this sport. And this year, this sport has given us incredibly dynamic teams.
If you watched USC and UCLA in the Big Ten championship game and said, man, this is boring, I don't need to see this again, that's on you.
Yeah,
that is on you.
You got to be
that
Stevie
matchup
Wonder.
is awesome. Yeah. Gotta be Stevie Wonder.
That was mean. Sorry. I feel like anytime you put Dawn Staley and Vic Schaefer on the same court together, you know it's going to be a dogfight. So I think that's must-see TV. A storyline for me that I love is Ivy League women's basketball getting 3 teams into the tournament. They made history last year with getting 2 teams, but this year Harvard got in. They won the championship, and then so did Columbia and Princeton. If you see those teams on your bracket, you don't want to play them. Like, Ivy League plays perfect, smart basketball. They're good on both sides of the ball and well coached. I think one of those 3 teams will bust somebody's bracket. And I am so confident in saying that.
And by the way, if you're surprised by that, you should have been listening to the show. Because it was about a month ago on this show, we talked about the Ivy League getting 3 teams in.
Sure did.
And then it happened. And that's
sure
just...
did.
Us having smart conversations about smart schools.
Uh-oh.
Hey, look, as you pointed out, if you're 1-12 at anything, you don't get asked. Like, I'm going to take my one victory lap. When I'm writing about the one thing, I'm just keep running around the room.
What's maybe one on the men's side that sticks out to you, Fitz?
Look, I like the opportunity for evil versus evil, right? Like, so, evil versus, like when I picked my championship game on our live stream earlier, part of the reason I picked, St. John's to take on Duke is because we're going to get, like, I just want to see Pitino versus, Duke. Like, good luck figuring out which villain you're going to root for. The fact that the second round of this tournament could give us Cal versus Pitino, like, I want that.
Cinema.
These are some of the most polarizing figures in our sport. I don't even think you need to put the guys out for the opening introductions. Just let the 2 coaches walk out and stand there and look like the grumpy guys they are, and then send them back to the sidelines and be like, it's on. Let's go.
Want to do a UFC call-in?
Oh,
Isn't that what they do for UFC where they go face-to-face?
Yeah.
And it's like, can you imagine?
I want to see them go like, why I wanna.
I want to see like the
Wanna
slap
tussle.
fight thing that's such a big deal right now. The slap fight, like where like you got one hit and like try and knock the other person out. Just let Cal and Pitino go at each other. Like
Pitino a little too old to be getting slapped.
But that's what's going to make it funny. I mean, sorry, I just promoted that an elderly gentleman should get slapped. So it's been a great last show for me. Yeah, I appreciate it so much.
So much. But you said they're the 2 most polarizing figures in this sport. I think they're 2 of the most polarizing figures in sports, period.
Yeah.
Cal and Pitino, I think everyone, as soon as the bracket came out on that side, everyone, all of us in this room, everyone on social media was like, yep, sign me up for that.
I also think that when you talk about coaches, one thing that's interesting on the men's side, you can't replace a legend. We talk about it all the time. So on the football side, we've been talking repeatedly, Kalen DeBoer replacing Saban's impossible. I think maybe at this point we've got one example of that we should give a little more credit to, because Shire's just stepping in like that. It has been, I don't want to say seamless, but Duke is right back there. Duke is exactly like
with a young team.
Exactly. Like with the best player in the sport.
Yeah.
I mean, Duke is as healthy as ever, and Coach K isn't on the sideline. So like, I think that's pretty astounding, and we don't necessarily give it the credit it deserves.
Mm-hmm. And as we kind of talk about coaches in that way, I think it'll be interesting to see, do we see a different Cal coach team in the postseason at Arkansas than we saw the past few years at Kentucky? Because when Arkansas hired John Calipari, it was like, we're winning a national championship. When Arkansas invested as much money in that team as they did and picked up as many 5-star transfers as they did, the expectations were, we're going to an Elite Eight, we're going to a Final Four, we're winning a national championship. But if it's same Cal, different school, different year, that's when you start to hear some of these rumblings. So it will be interested if there's maybe a refreshed team coached by John Calipari in the postseason.
Couldn't you say, too, that the SEC, the number of teams that got in, there's pressure on a lot of these coaches.
Yeah, 14.
Like, you got 14 coaches that are now suddenly looking at fan bases that, like, are Tennessee fans going to be happy if this thing doesn't go to the Final Four?
Are Tennessee fans ever happy?
Are Auburn fans going to be happy with Bruce Pearl if this is an early exit for Auburn?
Yeah, they're already pulling hair. If I was them,
yes.
I'd already be pulling hair.
It's going to start to become, whether it's fair or not, the conversation surrounding Bruce Pearl will start to look like the conversation that we've had with Cal at Kentucky. That he can get you there, but he can't get you past that point. He can't get you to the promised land. It's been a commentary about Rick Barnes for years, that Rick Barnes excels in January and falls short in March.
College basketball is going to be much like college football, firing these guys every couple of years because all you're doing is getting a 1 seed, and that's not good enough. Like that's the inevitability that comes from the way some of these brackets lay out.
Crazy. I have a spicy thing that might
Let's
happen.
hear it.
Oh.
Yes. Okay, so we talked about revenge tours earlier today. We know Notre Dame on the women's side is going to be on a revenge tour because of a 3 seed. I am picking out that Haley Van Lith, who used to play for Louisville or 2 years ago, played for LSU last year, didn't have a great year, but is playing with TCU this year, won Player of the Year. They won the regular season title and the Big 12 title. They have a first-round game with FDU, and if they win, they would play the winner of Louisville and Nebraska. And I think Louisville can beat Nebraska. And it would be so spicy to see Jeff Walls, head coach of Louisville, on one side, and Haley Van Lith, former point guard and star of Louisville, go up against them. I hope Haley Van Lith sends him home. I hope she does.
Ooh!
But I think that would be the spiciest little take that the committee could have given us. That was a little gift they gave us.
That would be the cherry on top of what has been a revenge tour all year long for Haley Van Lith. Obviously, last year she was at LSU. It was by all means and all metrics, whether it's just, eye test or points or, numbers, anything. It was the worst year of her career.
Yep.
She comes to TCU. She's Big 12 Player of the Year, Big 12 Tournament MVP. They win the Big 12 just 2 years removed from winning one conference game. This has been Haley Van Lith's year of telling everybody, oh, you said all those things about me when you made me a meme on Twitter when I was looking confused, looking at the clipboard in the middle of a game at LSU. You thought that I was washed. You thought that I couldn't be a star. Here I am, because she has been absolutely the missing piece for TCU.
Yep.
Another thing that's interesting to me, like we've spent the last few years talking about, can the same school win both, right? Like can UConn win both? Duke is in a really good spot right now on the men. Like you've got a 2 seed on the women's side. We talked about why that bracket could, Duke they got to look at Dawn Staley and say, how the hell do we get through that? But and I don't know that there's an easy answer, but there's a path that lays out that puts Duke hoisting 2 trophies. And that's still I think as we get closer to the Final Four, we're going to be paying a lot of attention to that.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think you possibly could say the same for Tennessee. Tennessee on the men's side, for sure. They're experienced, they're battle-tested, whatever. On the women's side, it's a Tennessee team that plays an interesting style. They hockey sub, 5 players in, 5 players out every 2 minutes. But they play this style in which they play 94 feet defense. They're pressuring, they're athletic. I don't believe in it. I think that if you get past the first line of defense, you can score on them all day. But to some teams in the tournament who have not faced a style that's 94 feet in your face, we're going to wear you down, Tennessee could find themselves in a Sweet 16 and possibly be a bit of a dark horse. And as a 5 seed, not too bad.
Can you figure out how to break through that in one day? Like from a coaching standpoint,
halftime adjustments. This is why we talk about coaching and why coaching is so important.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in the tournament, right, I think all coaches have told me before, like, we're focused on us. No matter who the other person is on the other side, we know what we've done for 30 plus games, so we're focused on us. So I think the first half, you focus on your game plan and doing what you can do. But at halftime, if you get beat by 15 and turn the ball over left and right, you have to make halftime adjustments. I just also think that Tennessee defense is just like, fake pressure. Like it looks scary and it looks really bad, but then you get to the second line, you're like, oh, it's a 2-on-0. I can make a layup. I don't know, but I think for a team that hasn't faced pressure, they could give them some problems.
We have so many storylines in this tournament.
Man,
we have so much potential for tea. It already is tea. And it already feels like it's going to be a bracket that could be shaping up for a 15 upsetting a 2 and a 16 upsetting a 1. And we are so here for it. That is going to do it for us today. I'm Caroline Fenton. You can find me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. He is Jason Fitz. You can find him at Jason Fitz. She is Ice Young. You can find her at IceYoung23. Guys, it's been so fun hanging out in person. Let's do it again soon sometime.
It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It was an adequate time.
Adequate time.
It was an adequate time spending
Am I
time
tall?
with you, Fitz. Yeah.
No.
You're the
No.
tallest person ever.
Please don't lie. Oh,
Wait,
okay.
Yeah.
Super tall.
So tall.
I mean, she just said you were tall, and I like.
Well, I kind of am.
Okay, are we going to talk about like?
I did play basketball.
Right. Okay, but I mean,
And I wasn't the shortest on the court
okay. I
most of the time.
just we're about the same height, so
Okay.
okay.
Which makes me tall,
Wait,
right?
I'm so
For a
glad that
woman?
I've never had to get in
Doesn't
any
make me
of these
short.
am I taller
okay.
or are you taller kind of conversations because I always just bend the knee. I always just defer. But anyways, tall or not, we appreciate
I'm
everyone for
basically
stopping
Marcus
by
Morris
the
on this show. I don't know what you're talking about.
We gotta go now. Now he's talking
I'm
crazy.
basically
Enough. I
huge.
gotta separate the children. Don't
basically
make me
huge.
turn this car around.
Okay.
But appreciate everyone for stopping by the program. Make sure to give the show a like. Make sure to give the show a subscribe. Make sure to give the show a review. We always appreciate y'all every time you interact with the show. So we will be back with a full reaction to the first round of the NCAA tournament. More hot takes, more predictions. We'll see y'all soon.